Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Azure podcast. This is April 4th, 2022, and we are recording episode 419, talking about Azure Front Door. And no, this is not your imagination. We have Abhishek Tiwari on to talk about Front Door. He was on, I don't know, maybe a month and a half ago, to talk about some other services, around our DNS offerings. But we have him on today to talk about something different. So if you've heard him on before, stick around. We got a nice new topic for you. So I'm joined by Cynthia is here, Russell's here, and Sajit is here, obviously, as well as our special guest, Abhishek. So folks, what do we have for news today? Who wants to go first?
Start with, if you like. So on Azure Batch, there's been a simplification that's just gone into public preview around the way in which the nodes can communicate back with the batch host controller. So in previous iterations, you used to have to set, I think, 3 or 4 different networking rules to allow the communication inbound and outbound, and that would open some ports up a bit more freely than you might like or want. So they simplified that a little bit now, which improves security and means that you've got less work to do. So the batch VMs can communicate with the batch controller pretty much by opting into this new simplification thing. And I think it means you only need to open 1 rule instead of 3 or 4 as you did before. And I think that's going to happen as a default behavior in future. So look out for that, but there'll be obviously emails sent out as the changeover happens as well.
Yeah, I had one in there. This is related to Cosmos DB. And we haven't spoken a lot about Cosmos DB of late. Of course, I think it is pretty much the one of our most popular services. When you design a Cosmos DB database, you have to pick a partition key that is defined for the database, and that's often a very difficult decision to make upfront because you don't know what the workload is going to be like until you actually put data and you put queries, and then you realize, oh, I had the wrong partition key. I need to go back. So now they've come up with this new thing called the Azure Cosmos DB Partition Key Advisor Notebook. And notebooks is a feature in the portal that you could use with Cosmos DB resource, where you could kind of do some free-form queries inside of the browser, inside of the portal itself. And in this particular notebook, you could do kind of a what-if analysis, like, hey, what if I pick this particular partition key, or what if I pick that partition key? How might that affect the kind of queries that I want to run against this? And you can point it against an existing data set. So maybe you do have a production system and you want to say, hey, is that tuned correctly? And so this is a good way to tune an existing system, or if you're starting afresh, just put some minimal data and then run the queries against that. It tells you if you're doing cross-partition queries, for example, which is always the most difficult to identify upfront, or if there's any better partition key that might be suited for your workload. So it's a good feature. I'm planning to look at it for some of my Cosmos DB databases as well, just to see if they're doing well.
Yeah, that sounds a good one. I remember struggling with that myself when I was first playing with Cosmos DB as well. I've got another couple. I know, Evan, you got one in there as well, but first one is just a quick one about Azure Bastion support for Kerberos now. So you can remote desktop using Kerberos authentication, where before it was NTLM only. And the other one is Azure Arc support for VMware Vsphere servers. So Azure Arc is our kind of like remote monitoring thing, and it's just great to see that capability expanding and you being able to now monitor and pull in on-premise VMware vSphere servers into your monitoring estate, basically. So yeah, great little thing addition there. And I think we're also supporting the Azure VMware solution that can be in a private cloud as well. So that supports it same as well.
Yeah, it must be callback day because Isabella and Tenu were on a few months ago to talk about Azure Bastion, and I think if my memory is right, they told us about the Kerberos thing off air. We couldn't talk about it during the show. It's sort of neat to see Kerberos coming back as we figure out how to do it across a distributed world. But yeah,
public preview only at the moment. Both those, the Azure Arc one and the Bastion one, they're both public previews. So yeah, just watch out for that.
Yep. Yeah, and I did want to talk about the bring your own IP addresses one. I think this is really cool. This is something we've been looking for years in the SDN space, right? Is if you own an IP address on premises, now you can bring this into your Azure externally facing resources. Now, and you do it very similar to the way you do some other IP address management, where you create the object, we verify that you own it, all that kind of stuff. We do that for ExpressRoute as well. And then you can swap it into your resource. So if you have a, you're replacing an on-premises firewall, for example, with an Azure firewall, you don't have to tell your customers, hey, you need to switch over to this new IP. I don't know exactly. I looked at the documentation some. We may have to do some digging on this, but I suspect there's probably a little bit of downtime somewhere as you change the ownership and the mapping, from a DNS perspective. But it's a heck of a lot better than telling customers you have to change your IP address. At that point, maybe just take a little bit of downtime over the weekend or something. So, but that's
if only we had a DNS expert on the call. That'd be good, wouldn't it?
Actually, I didn't even think about this. Abhishek, is this coming out of you guys as well to some extent?
No, actually, we would be the one of the bigger user, like, in the front door and other parts of bring your own IP, which I'll touch base. It's a great feature. But by the way, it's usually like, you get a prefix to own your on-premise, so you might avoid downtime, like, bringing the prefix and then use one of the IP in that range, typically your other firewalls, and the system
I got
would
you.
be, yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, so you sort of bring half and then you bring the rest of it over. Okay, nice, cool. Anything else? I think that's the last of the news.
Well, just on that
I just
one,
put in one.
go ahead,
There's a digital event coming up that is called Innovate for Impact. And as we've known, the past 2 years has been a huge challenge for both born in the cloud enterprises as well as established enterprises. And this is a digital event that we're bringing together Aqua Security, Confluent, Elastic, Trimble, and KPMG to discuss with them how they have navigated through this time and how the cloud has really enabled them to continue to innovate.
That's cool. Excellent. So this is sort of, we have partners coming in to speak as well as us. Okay, awesome.
Nice.
Cool. Great. Well, yeah, no. So with that roundup done, let's flip over to our special guest, Abhishek Tiwari. Abhishek, we had you on a few months ago to talk about DNS. Now we have you on to talk about front door. DNS, I think everybody knows, right? We've all used DNS in our lives. What is this front door thing? Let's start out with that. Like, what is it, and why would I want to use front door?
I was like glad to be back again. The Azure Front Door in last episode, like, for the DNS, when I was there, we talked about how DNS is a fundamental dial tone service. Azure Front Door is another, we call it internally as a global super service that, like, where Microsoft critical crown jewels and then Azure, like, critical service have taken explicit dependencies on. So
No
Azure,
pressure.
yeah. No pressure, like DNS, no pressure over there. So Azure Front Door, as the name suggests, it's a front door for your internet globally distributed user base or globally distributed your backend applications. It's a front door for that. So it has started for internal consumptions initially. It has started with Bing. When Bing was on the development, we needed a performance acceleration. And then the COGS efficiency. So it started with Bing, and then, like, the Office 365, all critical services using it, LinkedIn, MSN. And then we realized we have such a great asset. Why not, like, to have it available for Azure customers? So we launched this for the Azure customers. In nutshell, if you look at, like, Gartner and New World, it comes under the application delivery segment, where it provides some of the CDN related functionalities like content caching. It provides dynamic acceleration, where, like, it's not the cache content, but you need to get those the content from your backend fast. And it also provides protection, high availability, load management, COGS efficiency to your backend. So in terms, it's an asset for all the application developers, and then for the applications, large applications.
So, but front door has, like, it's actually got pieces underneath it, right? Because there's a hook in with CDN, content delivery. There's a hook in with WAF, not web application framework.
Firewall.
Firewall. Yeah, thanks. Too many acronyms. I got 3 others for WAF sitting in my head too. Web application firewall. Like, there's pieces to front door that sort of, do they make up front door, or those things I
Yes.
can layer in on top?
Yes. So front door, I want to start with, like, as I said, it's a four fundamental offering. First is an acceleration. Acceleration is um, in today's world, like, there are so many critical applications, and then latency is a new currency. So front door provides, like, early termination as close to the user termination in the edge, Microsoft Edge networks, and then it keeps the warm connection back to your backend. So it provides an acceleration. So it's a big framework out there. Then it provides, as you said, the content caching. So it's a distributed caching using all the environments. Like, we have about 180 plus Microsoft Edge sites where front door is running outside of the Azure data center, and it's a service, a critical service that has basically all the customers' content cached and distributed over a pool, so we can pull it from the edge itself. Then it third becomes the load management. The front door user can come from any edge site, right? Like, you could have an application that is distributed in different Azure data center and regions, but your user could be globally. So they could come from, like, APAC, Europe, US. Um, Front keeps warm connection while it takes the user to the closest location, but it keeps the warm connection back to your backend, and then run different load balancing algorithm. You could do a capacity-based load balancing. Hey, I want to make sure, like, my Europe backends are running hot, though they are healthy. Like, since that capacity is approaching critical thing, like, switch the thing to the US or APAC. It does basically on the performance wise, like, which one is the fastest backend to connect to, and it keeps those connection. It does the round robin, it does the custom. So these are the, like, the algorithm it runs, and it runs on a per request basis. So if any reason, like, say for example, one of your entire data center fails, there is no cache connections out there, and the next request would simply transition to the next available backend. So the failover and high availability is instantaneous. There is nothing like, the cache DNS TTL or that some of those things that would impact such a failover. So that's why we guarantee to be within 10 seconds failover in the major events. Front door itself is a highly distributed, as I said, in 180 plus edge locations, and any edge sites can fail anytime. Any server, any rack uh, could fail, and then user must not notice anything. We provide 4 nines of availability right now, 99.99, and we aim to, like, even improve on that, the SLS.
So lots and lots of capabilities across the
Yeah,
board. Basically everything you want from
yeah,
a
and sorry,
edge
I
connectivity.
I forgot to touch the last one on the protection side. So as you said, like, we have a web application firewall which runs basically the managed set of rules, and then custom rules. Custom rules, like, it could do a rate limiting on your user. So if not one single user could hog your application, you could
Right.
do basically total the quota of the resources, the one of the application could use. It has the geo filtering based on the which geo your users are coming. So it's a set of managed and custom rule. Custom could write, like, their own rules based on the header and body, certain, like, the parameters they can match, and then take a set of actions on those requests, and that is allowed under the web framework. um, in all this, uh, we have to understand, edge. The data center is a big pond, right? Like, where it's like, we call it, it's like infinite capacity. Azure offers you infinite capacity. In edge, it's a small cup. Like, we usually, like, have um, limitation on power, space, how much hardware you can put in. So it's not that, like, in the edge sites you can run at any scale on the hardware as you wish or as you grow. So the way you design your application, it's like totally distributed. You can, like, distribute not just on the failure scenario, but the usage scenario. You can shift runtime users to the nearby locations, to the failover rings, without impacting user. A second thing is, since it's a small cup, you cannot afford even a small drops getting spilled over. It's costly. So you design in a way where the efficiency becomes the one of the main criteria after resiliency and availability. And then with front door, when we put anything in, so for example, where when we were considering OpenSec the open source, the web modules, we realize if we use those, it tanks the performance to 15x. And it's because you have these multiple of tens of thousands of rules, and then every request needs to go through it, and it would take time. But that's something we couldn't afford to run on these edge sites. So we from the grounds up built our own WAF engine, and then our goal was when it's running, it should not even the most compute in the sensitive rules should not take more than 10% of the resources. That what you would do without the WAF rules. That's the goal we have put in, and then we use the hardware offloads, the stack. Our engineers have put the framework in the lowest stack in the networking to make sure we do the highest performance available in the system when processing those rules. Those are some of the examples even when
Yeah,
developing
no, that's
WAF.
great. It's a lot of thinking into that design.
Yeah.
Yeah, Abhishek, I was trying to wrap my head around what you said about keeping the connections warm, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, as a developer, let's say, I've put a ASP.NET Core
Mhm.
Azure website, right? I've got something out there. Now I'm thinking about putting Azure Front Door in front of it.
Uh-huh.
What is the process? What should I be thinking about when I do something like that?
So there are two aspects when you are designing: is this particular website, does it have a static content or not, and how much is the user would be using the static content versus dynamic content. The what you don't have to think about is with the front door is how many users would be connecting concurrently, or SSL connections you would be getting it, because that's not your worry. Front door would be terminating all the new SSL connection, and then those HTTP requests would be given on that warm pipe we already have. So you're not going through renegotiation of SSL, TCP handshake, and that's where it you save money, because these negotiation SSL level are costly. So for example, I might be getting on the front door side of 1 million requests, and you have say 5,000 servers and as ASP.NET running, and because of redundancy I might just put 4 connections per server, right? So it's 20,000 warm connections, and then boom, that's it. Those million connection come in and going, it's not impacting. You are just responding to the HTTP request and response. And if you could do a cache content, then you are not even seeing those requests and response coming to you. um, uh,
So when it comes to my certificate, which is was hosted, let's say, in my in the app service,
right.
SSL certificate or TLS certificate, what do I do? What has to be done to put that inside of front door so it can terminate the requests?
So we take the secrets again, we each front door sites, the software, and then the physical uh, uh, the networks, and then a space gets FedRAMP certified. So it's and precisely for these reasons. So the right way to do it, put your certificate as recommended by Azure in Azure Key Vault. So it's not you give through some UI and through front door API way of this certificate because we want to be very, very careful on those certificates. And then the front door has a basically app ID in AAD, and you give front door application a permission to read it from your key vault. So then it uses the key vault API to fetch us like the way your application would be fetching it, and then it stores in through the hardware is TPM protected. So when we store this SSL certificates, it's put into, it's encrypted, on top of it put into the TPM itself, and that's the way we use it. This allows us the opportunity also, if your certificate is near expiry, you'll get a notification from front door saying, hey, your certificate is reaching expiry. And if you renew your certificate in Key Vault and put updated certificate, you don't have to tell front door again. Front door automatically fetches the new available certificate. There is some cooling period where it it waits, and then it fetches and it starts rolling out the newer certificate. So it does the certificate management for your application as well.
Thank you.
Abhishek, when we're thinking about Azure Front Door being just geo and globally distributed. How does that work together when we're thinking about building solutions in the disaster recovery scenarios where I may have different instances in different regions? Does that mean that I would have to configure Azure Front Door for all of my regions, or in terms of like availability zones? How does that work?
It depends. No, you don't have to. Front door would allow, right? So, for example, if you have a compliance way of saying, hey, I'm getting like this set of users which are coming to the front door. I want to serve it from a set of your application backends in a particular geo. So you just create a one profile, like because it's a one application. It just your user base is distributed globally, and then you might have a different compliance requirement for those users, and then you can write the WAF rules, like you can write like the available managed rule, just saying, hey, epic region, if this is like coming from epic region, this is the backend they need to go for, and it would work. You can write on the custom, like if your application is sending a specific header for the compliance, and then you want to do a special processing on those, you can write like your own custom rules looking for that header, and then take an action, basically add like new headers, drop the request, forward it to the backends differently. So those are the actions available for you to do it. But in most of the cases, you don't have to like recreate your front door profile just because you have a distributed set of users and then distributed set of backends.
Then does Front Door know to find the available backends if
Yes.
say, okay.
Yes, it does. It has a health probe. While it does the load management, it has a health probe. And health probe, and there is a thought, like again, like being an edge. So it's not um, like I have these front door servers that would like pinging your backends and then getting the health. We are distributed across the globe, right? So we have like say 20 plus thousand bare metal servers running in, and each could forward a user could come and connect to any of the server, and that server could connect to your backend. What we do not want that every server doing some sort of health probe to figure it out whether you are healthy or unhealthy, because that would just create a DOS for you. You were getting like these many just
DDoS
health.
yourself.
So this is where like you have this the distributed probing, and then like read as a style, like the results cached and then upload, and then like you share that responsibility. So yes, it does the health probe, but it does in a responsible manner, not to create that load to the backend.
What you talked about WAF, and it sounds like Front Door has a number of the traffic manager type features, and we talked about the CDN. How do I know I'm a good candidate for Front Door and leveraging those capabilities versus go turn on application gateway and its WAF in my single deployment, or go set up a traffic manager profile on my own? So basically, how do I know whether I'm a fit for the individual pieces on the individual services, or whether I should go to Front Door? Should I just always be on Front Door? Like, what's the thinking
But
there?
there is a guidance available on the product, the guidance when you should eat. But in some summary, like the Azure Front Door, if you are internet facing application, like where
Mhm.
users connect over internet, and backend could be on premise, or backend could be like in the data centers, Azure data center. And if you have some of the rule of thumbs, like if you are not looking just your workload in a VNet in a region, if that's the scenario where like you just have deployed your workloads in a particular VNet, and that's where all your users would be connecting from a particular region, you should use application gateway. But if you have even like your backend deployed in a single region, but if your user base is globally, then I recommend to use front door, because then it would let user connect and terminate early in the edge sites. And if you have a multiple backends, including on-premise and then uh, different data centers over public, in that's such a globally distributed scenario, use front door. And of course, there are like if it's a caching related thing, then obvious choice would be a front door. Traffic Manager, other hand, provides a traffic management decision for all protocols, since it's a DNS based, right? So Azure Front Door and both Application Gateway are L7 web based. And if
Oh,
you need
right.
to do the
Okay.
Traffic Manager for all, so it won't do influence on the active request, but based on the DNS, it will let you choose the endpoint. And then once it lets you choose the endpoint, it doesn't matter which protocol you run and how do you do so.
So it sounds like, if I sort of simplify that, it sounds like you're saying if your end users are coming from a very geographically dispersed
Right,
capability or source, you should be thinking about front door. If on the other
right.
hand, if for me, I'm in North Carolina. If all my users are coming from North Carolina and I put my stuff in the East US data center somewhere, front door is sort of overkill for
Right.
me
Yeah.
in that mindset. Okay.
And that, yes, right. Yeah. It's like, in the VNet, and then you might be like, want to leverage application gateway and then have
Right.
more intelligence within your VNets with application gateway.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll definitely get that link of some of the guidance
Right.
from you, so we can include it when we post this.
The other part in the front door is since it's over the internet and it terminates the request by default, all the distributed DOS attack for like the rogue packets, it's just get terminated and front door. And if it's not a legitimate request which front door can forward to your backend, it's a front door is doing that fronting for the
Oh, so it
attack.
includes some DDoS capabilities as well.
And and
Okay.
it's with the large capacity available, it absorbs most of the time, right? Like you won't even be notified because front door should be just simply absorbing those attacks and then scenarios for you.
Abhishek, you mentioned earlier how the front door, it takes a request and then has this warm connection. I assume the warm connection is internal through the Azure backbone. So in that scenario, uh, as an application developer, knowing that I have this wide variety of edge resources through Azure Front Door all over the world, can I just sit back and say, oh, I'm just going to have a couple of servers in East US. I don't have to worry about being global from an application perspective because I know Front Door is doing that for me.
In some cases that does work. What we have seen, if you do a split TCP and even in the warm connection, you have to go far back. An example that you are saying, say you have deployed on the say US East, and then user might be connecting from say APAC India region. Despite you going and fetching from the US East, just the fact you didn't have to do the SSL negotiation, just the fact you had the warm connection, you will still get the benefit, and then a much better latency in those scenarios. Though we recommend to still have some sort of
Of course,
high
of course. I mean,
availability for your backend available.
I may have a couple, but I think the biggest probably problem for a developer has been like, oh, do I need to have points of presence all over the world, right, to serve all my customers?
Right.
And now I can have maybe two, right, or maybe three if you really want to be more resilient, and then not have to worry about having them everywhere.
This is another just Ivan, you have your hands raised, so I'll if you have a question, I'll answer. But I
Yeah.
want to touch base one more point.
Go ahead.
So the other part is you don't have to worry about is the change management for your application. Say for example, like you are globally distributed, and then you want to introduce a particular backend, you decide, oh, I'm getting too much overload on this one, I add another one. Now that change needs to be available if you are doing the fronting for your application, you need to make sure that change is available to all distributed front ends of your application. This is done by Azure Front Door. So Azure Front Door, we have internal service called Delaware that takes customer config and that deploys across the global fleet, because technically your user can come from anywhere in the world, and it's a risk also, because I'm taking, as a service owner, I'm taking your change and I'm deploying everywhere. And though this is a customer change, my service should not get impacted, but there are bugs, like in software we live with, like bugs. So we have put many protection layers even for the customer config changes. So we follow SDP. You must have heard in all the talks, SDP for your own code as the config and data is equal to code SDP all across. But we have taken an extra step here. For the customer changes, we do SDP. So we take that the customer config, and then we deploy in 5 or 6 stages, and we do this fast because customer cannot wait days for its config. So we do it under 10 minutes. But in that 10 minutes, we get a valid feedback from the stage 1, and then ensuring that front door is able to do the data processing, all the positive, negative feedback. And that's how we roll it across the fleet. And once we have say X threshold coming with a positive feedback, that particular configuration, it put it to the LKG, so last known good. So in future, if there are crashes happens and we don't know what, just because a bug, there are the protections where it can automatically fall back to these LKGs and then could go to multiple of these LKGs. There is a crash protection service we have where for unknown reason you get a crash, in time in the environment, the system analyzes the type of crashes and tries to figure it out pattern when these crashes happen. It's like request from a particular IPs or client or record. And once it forms those metadata, it blocks that metadata across the environment to avoid those crashes. So there are these layers of protections over the years we have put in. And I get super excited about on
For
these
those of you who
innovations.
aren't on video, you could just see he's starting to light up as
Right.
he's talking about these pieces.
That is really amazing. Thank you.
That's funny. Although we didn't plan it, it turned out to be that you guys, the front door team just had a bunch of announcements in the last week or two, talking about releasing. I think it was the premium version of front door, and so now you've got 2 SKUs, the standard SKU and the premium SKU. At a high level, what's the difference between them? Are they the same implementation at the end of the day? Is there why would I want to look at premium if I'm running front door today?
Oh yeah, that's a great question, Ivan, and it's some history and context. Front door, as I said, it started as for internal consumptions. We had Azure CDN as the Verizon and Akamai as a service for the CDN. It's not directly related with front door. So we have a front door stack, and then we have Azure CDN. And before we could release to the front door, which supports acceleration and all, we have a Microsoft CDN stack under Azure CDN that doing the CDN functionality. And that is basically created a source of confusion to our customer. That's the biggest driver. You really, when you put an application would have some portion of static content, some dynamic, and then you are not sure, should I go CDN route, should I go Azure front door route? And so the first major change is its positioning. It's just one single SKU, right? We call it now standard and premium, and then you don't have to worry about a static versus dynamic versus this protection. It's just the features of some premium features, but on the basic as an application functionality, both would provide dynamic and a static acceleration. So that's one driver. Then the pricing and then the other aspects were super confusing as well. So this is provided tiered pricing, understandable on the usage. That's the second part. So convergence is a one big thing. Then there are of course features, and one great feature that I would like to talk to Ivan is a private link integration. So when you take all our competitors, including CloudFront, who's way ahead in terms of the CDN offering has started much earlier than us, but their backends still all public facing internet, public IP backends. In this release of Azure Front Door, you could just have your private the backends in the VNet, private address space, and then completely isolated, and front door could still talk to your private. You don't have to expose on
So
a
I don't need
public
a
endpoint.
public endpoint.
You
at that
don't
point.
need a public endpoint. So
Yeah,
that's
great.
and that's a feature requested by many of our enterprise customers, and that would be a feature that would provide in today's world the security, right? Where because we truly recommend for customers to lock down their the VNet space and then go with the private link. So
Nice.
There are many other features as well, but these two things, the convergence and then the common billing pricing, and then some of the premium features, especially the private link space. We do have, by the way, it's a huge investment on analytics. So you could get like, different analytics on insights on your traffic, user traffic, web domain records, like, the geos. So all sorts of the cache hit ratio, cache miss, like, the load on your backend. So different type of analytics and insights as part of these new SKU offerings.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, Abhishek, maybe one last question here for me is, we'd like to be pretty transparent on the show here in terms of the services that we talk about, and we know they all cost money for our users eventually. And so,
Eventually.
yeah, I mean, I want to make sure that we give our users the right idea of, what this is going to cost for them, both the standard SKU as well as the premium SKU. What are some of the factors they should be considering as they try to budget this into their Azure spend?
I'm not, like, honestly a good person on being on the dev side. It's our PMs have done lots of thinking on the pricing. But one thing I could tell you, the front door is the overall the segment is very competitive, and then the pricings are like super, like, the lower side of it. For example, like, if I recall, it's like even like in a fraction of a cent, or like, maybe 1/10 of that cent to transfer 1 GB of data, and then multiple, like, suites of requests. So um, if 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 you are a large organization, that's what we have done on the Azure front door premium SKU. If you pay per request, and then you are a large organization, you have millions of the requests, it amounts gets like much bigger. And we have put up a bundle packet, so like you don't have to worry about. And if you are a small, then you are not worried about these fixed costs, right? Like, for example, you deploy some of the dedicated gateway style solution. No matter whether you send 1 request or 10 requests, you have to pay that much money for the instances that are dedicated to you. In that case, front door, you are just paying for, like, few of the requests. So I would say this pricing should work for all range, like, from SMB to a very large enterprise.
Nice. So it sounds like we sort of built it thinking about there's
Right.
different consumers and different ways they want to pay for it based
Right.
on their use case. Okay,
Right.
makes sense. Great. Well, no, this was awesome, Abhishek. Thank you for coming on. Any last words or anything you want to leave with the audience around front door?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, we are not done. That's what I would say. There are, like, the thinking around, especially when I see in this today's world, like, the cybersecurity protection, the new critical like, the applications requiring the performance where even a 1 millisecond, like, would cost them their money and then lose their customers. So we are in this journey, and soon you would hear, again, like, there are certain things in works. Hopefully Ivan would invite me next to talk about some of those major things coming soon. Yes, so my part is we want to be the best platform to carry all application data in the world, and then that's our vision, and then we are working towards it.
Yeah, no, that sounds great.
And I was going to say, how easy would it be for our listeners or customers to actually try this out, right? Like, if let's say they have some workload currently running and they just want to quickly, like, let me see what front door can do for me. Is it like a long drawn process? They have to get architects involved and whatnot, or is it let me just hook it up?
It should be just hook it up. Even if you are not having your own certificate, you don't have to go to those authorities to get your certificate. We will give you certificate from a public authority by ourselves, like fully integrated. And it's there is no deployment time and bringing up your instances. It's a PaaS multi-tenant solution. It's just creating your logical resource. Boom, you go for it.
What I heard was our next hack Sajid, we'll put front door in front of our tiny little Azure podcast.
That's exactly why I asked the question.
And if it doesn't work, we know exactly where to go
That's right.
at that point. So, okay, great. Russell, any last questions from you? Sajid, anything from you?
No, it's been great. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
awesome. Abhishek, thanks for coming back on in such a relatively short time again. And we will probably hold you to that when you guys do your next batch of releases and features. We'll get you to come back this fall or something.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, great. Thanks, folks.
Thank
Catch
you.
everybody later. Bye now.